Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. Today, we're going to be looking at something pretty controversial. We're going to be talking about Mia Khalifa and what she's been saying about the U.S. military and veterans. You probably know her as a former adult film actress, but now she's a social media influencer and an activist. And she's known for really not holding back on her opinions, especially when it comes to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
You know, she really doesn't shy away from anything controversial. And it's interesting because it's put her right in the middle of this huge conversation.
Yeah, for sure. So to help us get a handle on this whole thing, we're going to be taking a look at articles from a bunch of different sources. Marca, the Hindustan Times, and we're going to do a deep dive into a piece from Reuters, which is the financial news site. Okay, so first things first, what exactly did she say that got everyone so riled up?
Well, she posted this video that blew up online. I mean, it got over 3 million views before she took it down. In the video, she's basically saying she hopes that U.S. soldiers come home with PTSD. And she says this sarcastically because she wants them to see how little support she thinks the government gives veterans. She even uses this like baby voice and pretends to be a soldier saying, I hope you go over there and get your little brain all scrambled up.
Wow. Yeah, I can see how people would be upset by that right away. That's pretty strong language.
Yeah, it's like she's trying to provoke people on purpose.
And it worked. I mean, veterans and just the general public were all over her for it, especially because of that part where she's talking about how the VA would just offer breathing exercises to try to fix a veteran's broken mind. People thought she was making light of PTSD, which is a really serious mental health problem that so many veterans struggle with.
Right. It's interesting, though, because even though she got rid of the video, she's not backing down from what she said. That's right. She actually defended her comments in an interview with the New York Times. She claims she never meant to disrespect veterans themselves. Her point is that she's trying to show what she sees as a huge problem, which is the lack of care and support for people who served in the military.
So she's trying to use satire to draw attention to a serious issue, even if it is harsh. And this makes me wonder, can humor, even really edgy humor, be effective when you're dealing with something as sensitive as this?
That's the big question, isn't it? And there's not really an easy answer. I mean, satire can be a really powerful tool for social commentary. It can cut through all the noise and make people face some hard truths. But it can also be really easy to misunderstand, especially online, where things get taken out of context all the time.
It seems like her video is a perfect example of that. Some people saw it as a legitimate way to criticize the government's treatment of veterans, while others just saw it as a disrespectful attack on those who serve.
Yeah, and it's important to remember that this isn't the first time she said something controversial. She's been pretty outspoken in her criticism of Israel, often calling it an apartheid state. And that's gotten a lot of backlash. And after the Hamas attack on Israel in October 2023, Playboy actually cut ties with her over some of her statements.
Oh, wow. I didn't know Playboy had taken such a strong stance.
Yeah, it was a big deal. They felt like her comments went too far, even though she said she was just expressing her anti-Zionist views. In that same New York Times interview, she even compared the Palestinian resistance to the fall of the Berlin Wall. She called the people involved freedom fighters.
So basically, her critics are saying that she's not just expressing an opinion, but actually contributing to harmful rhetoric.
Right. And this brings up another big question for us. Where's the line between free speech and rhetoric that could actually cause harm? How do we navigate these really complex conversations, especially when they're happening on social media, which tends to make everything more extreme?
It's definitely not an easy balance to strike, but what I find interesting is that beneath all this heated debate, there's a much bigger issue at play here, and that's the mental health of veterans and the support systems they have available to them.
Absolutely. And that's where things get really interesting.
Yeah.
Because even though her video might have started this controversy, it's also given us a chance to explore something much bigger and more complex. It's like she's accidentally shown a light on a problem that often gets overlooked.
Okay, I'm hooked. So where do we go from here?
Well, one of the sources you sent an article from Reuters. It gives us a really interesting perspective on this. It talks about the International Mining and Resources Conference that happened in Sydney.
Wait, a mining conference? What does that have to do with what we're talking about?
Just hear me out. The article is basically saying that there's a sense of missed opportunity in Australia. They have all these resources, and they could be a major player in the global shift towards renewable energy. And the author argues that they could be doing way more to support veterans, especially when it comes to helping them find new careers in this changing energy landscape.
So are you saying that there's a connection between what Khalifa said, which is all about veterans' needs, and this article about the potential for veterans to play a role in a changing world?
Exactly. Even though they seem totally different at first glance, both of these situations are pointing to the same thing. We need to rethink how we support veterans, especially as they're transitioning back to civilian life in a world that's changing so quickly.
This is starting to make a lot of sense, and
Mhm.
it definitely shows that this isn't just about Mia Khalifa. It's about a much bigger conversation that we need to be having as a society.
I totally agree. And that's exactly what we're going to keep exploring as we go deeper into this. We'll look at the challenges veterans face when they come home, both in terms of their mental health and fitting back into civilian life. And we'll look at the systems that are in place to help them and ask whether those systems are really enough in a world that's changing as fast as ours is. You know, it's wild to think about how Khalifa, even without meaning to, brought this really important issue to everyone's attention. It's like her statement, even if it was shocking, kind of wakes us up and forces us to face a problem we might want to ignore.
Yeah, it's like ripping off a Band-Aid on a wound that many people would rather just keep covered up. So let's talk about that wound. What are some of the specific things veterans have to deal with when they get back home? We talked about PTSD, but how does that actually show up in their everyday life?
Well, PTSD can show itself in a lot of different ways. Imagine you're a veteran who just came back from a war zone. You're used to all this chaos and having to be on high alert all the time. And then you try to go to the grocery store. All of a sudden, noises and people and lights, it can be overwhelming. It can trigger all kinds of things like anxiety flashbacks, even panic attacks.
That sounds so tough. It makes you realize that even something simple like going to the store can be a huge obstacle for veterans dealing with PTSD.
Exactly. And it's not just the mental and emotional impact. Lots of veterans also have to deal with physical injuries, chronic pain, and trouble adjusting to life outside the military. After years of structure and routine, getting back to a normal life can be hard. Finding a job, rebuilding relationships, it can all feel like too much, especially when they're also fighting these hidden wounds for more.
So how are we doing as a society when it comes to supporting veterans who are going through all of this? Are the systems we have in place enough?
That's a really complicated question. There are organizations like the VA that offer a lot of different services, like medical care, mental health counseling, job training, and help with finding housing. But the truth is that these systems are often overloaded and underfunded.
Yeah, I've heard stories about veterans having to wait forever to get an appointment and struggling to deal with all the bureaucracy.
It can be incredibly frustrating. And that's why I think Khalifa's outburst, even if you don't agree with how she said it, it does bring up a valid point. Are we doing enough to support the people who put their lives on the line for our country?
And you mentioned that article from Reuters about the mining conference. It sounded like the author was saying that we could be doing even more to help veterans, especially as the world keeps changing.
Exactly. The article talked about how Australia has the potential to be a leader in renewable energy and how veterans with their skills and discipline could be a big part of that transition, but also pointed out that we're not really taking advantage of these opportunities.
So it's not just about providing the traditional support systems, it's also about realizing that veterans have a lot to offer society, especially in these new and growing fields.
Right. And this goes back to what Khalifa was saying, although in a much more subtle way. It's about making sure that veterans have what they need, not just to survive, but to thrive in a world that's constantly changing.
It seems like we often focus on the immediate needs of veterans, like medical care and housing, but maybe we need to think more about the long term. How do we help them build good lives after they leave the military?
I think you're right. We need to realize that coming back to civilian life isn't just a one-time event. It's a process that takes time, and it needs a multifaceted approach that goes beyond just addressing their immediate needs.
Okay, so going back to Khalifa for a second, do you think what she did, even though it was controversial, could actually have a positive effect on this issue? Could she, even if it's in a roundabout way, be a catalyst for change?
It's definitely possible. I mean, she might have alienated some people with her approach, but there's no denying that she got people talking. And sometimes even negative attention can push people to take action.
It's like that saying, there's no such thing as bad publicity. Even if people are talking about Khalifa for the wrong reasons, at least they're talking about veterans' issues, which might not have happened otherwise.
Exactly. And I think that's one of the most interesting things about this whole situation. It makes us think about how online activism really works and how sometimes controversy, even if it's unintentional, can bring attention to really important issues.
It also makes you wonder if there are better ways to talk about these things. Even when they're sensitive topics, can you be provocative and respectful at the same time? Can you raise awareness without using language that could be offensive?
That's a great question. And I think it's something we all need to be thinking about, especially with social media being such a big part of how we talk about things these days. It's easy to get caught up in being outraged. But we need to remember that real change takes more than just anger and blaming people.
It takes actually talking to each other, trying to understand each other, and being willing to find common ground, even with people we don't agree with.
Exactly. And it means being able to look past the drama and focus on the real issues.
So if we forget about Khalifa for a minute and get back to the heart of the matter, what are some things we can actually do to better support veterans? What are some solutions that could make a real difference?
Well, first of all, we need to give the VA and other organizations that help veterans enough money and staff. We need to make sure they have the resources to offer care that's both timely and effective, both for physical and mental health.
That seems like a no-brainer. But I imagine it also takes a change in how we think about mental health as a society, especially when it comes to veterans.
You're absolutely right. We need to stop seeing mental health issues as something shameful and create an environment where veterans feel like they can ask for help without being judged.
And it's not just about treating the symptoms of things like PTSD, it's also about trying to prevent them in the first place. Is there anything we can do to better prepare soldiers for the mental and emotional challenges they might face when they come home?
That's a crucial point. Investing in mental health training before deployment and support programs afterwards, that could really help lessen the impact of trauma. We need to give our soldiers the tools they need, not just to make it through combat, but to actually thrive when they come back.
So it sounds like there's a lot we can do on a big picture level. But what about on a personal level? What can each of us do to support veterans in our own communities?
There are so many ways to get involved. You can volunteer at your local VA hospital, donate to organizations that help veterans, or even just reach out to veterans, and offer to listen.
Even small things can make a difference.
Exactly. And it's important to remember that supporting veterans isn't just about charity. It's about recognizing how much they're worth and how much they contribute to society.
Like that Reuters article said, there are so many ways veterans can keep contributing after they leave the military, whether it's in new fields like renewable energy or in their own communities.
Exactly. We need to create more opportunities for veterans to share their skills, experiences, and leadership qualities. They have so much to offer, and it's up to us to make sure they have the chance to do that.
It really feels like this whole Mia Khalifa thing, as messy as it was, has actually opened up a conversation we needed to have about how we can support our veterans.
It is interesting, isn't it? You always hear people say, there's no such thing as bad publicity. And I don't know if I completely agree with that, but I think there's some truth to it in this case. Khalifa's video, even though it was controversial and even hurt some people's feelings, it did shine a light on a really important issue.
It's like she kind of accidentally hit a nerve and made us see something we were ignoring. And even though I don't agree with how she did it, she definitely got people talking. And that's usually the first step towards change, right?
It is. And this whole thing got me thinking about online activism and how it works with the regular media. Khalifa's video went viral. Millions of views, tons of discussions. Could you imagine that happening with some boring policy paper or a press release?
No way. There's something about how direct and in your face she is that cuts through everything else and grabs people's attention. Whether they agree with her or not, they're at least thinking about the topic. And that's got to count for something, right?
Yeah, it shows you how powerful social media can be for creating change, but also how easy it is to lose control of the message once it's out there.
And that's exactly what happened with Khalifa, right? Even if she meant well, her message got twisted and blown out of proportion. It ended up being more about her and less about veterans' mental health.
Right, and that's something we should all think about when we're talking about things online. It's so easy to just react without thinking and end up spreading misinformation.
So as we're wrapping up this deep dive, what are some of the key things you think people should take away from this?
I think the biggest takeaway is that this isn't about Mia Khalifa or any one person. This is about all of us taking responsibility for supporting veterans.
And that support means more than just saying, thank you for your service. It means actually doing something to help them with the challenges they face, both the ones we can see and the ones we can't.
It means speaking up for better funding for the VA and other organizations that support them. It means pushing for better mental health resources and getting rid of the stigma around mental illness. It means recognizing all the skills and experiences veterans have and giving them opportunities to succeed in civilian life.
And it means being willing to have these tough conversations even when they make us uncomfortable, even when they make us question our own beliefs.
Exactly. Because in the end, it doesn't matter if you agree with Mia Khalifa or not. What matters is understanding that there's a serious problem that needs to be fixed. and that we all have a part to play in finding solutions.
So as you go about your day, think about how you can make a difference in the lives of veterans. Maybe you can volunteer your time or donate to a good cause. Or maybe you can be more proactive, like contacting your representatives about changing policies or starting a conversation in your own community.
Every little thing helps.
Oh.
And remember, supporting veterans isn't just about charity. It's about showing them that we value them and everything they've done for our country.
That's a great point to end on. Thanks for being with us for this deep dive.
It was my pleasure. And remember, the conversation doesn't end here. Keep learning, keep asking questions, and keep fighting for what you believe in.